years. But that's not what happens today, in today's world. Today's world is all about be, do, have. You know, not do, be, have, but be, do, have, and that's the hard order. And why do I talk about that? Well, why I talk about that is because that speaks to what's called EQ. And this is research I've done over the years where EQ is really emotional intelligence, and it's about the psyche of the individual, and it's about your self-awareness as an individual. You know, this EQ also is predicted, and this is studies that I've looked at in terms of what I've researched, predicts that leadership success is 2/1 to other attributes. 85% of top performers are high in EQ, and employees who develop EQ outperform their targets by more than 15%. And this is about you as an individual being self-aware about yourself and the surroundings that you're in. You know, soft skills turn into hard numbers over the years, and this has been proven time and time again. EQ means greater return. I'll give you some examples. U.S. Air Force, they reduced recruiter turnover by 30%. Hallmark increased productivity by 25%. And L'Oreal increased revenue by $2.5 million per month. So that's pretty significant in terms of what this does. So what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence really is about being self-aware and relating successfully with others. You know, each of you are leaders in this room. And when you look at leadership, you know, the true testament of leadership is just look behind you and see who's following. If no one's following, that means something is wrong. And it's usually with you. You've got to discover within and say, okay, what am I not doing right as a leader? You know, what is EQ physically? Well, physically, when you look at the brain and break it down, you know, we feel it first. You know, as we're with people in a room, we get feelings, different kinds of signals. We then assign a meaning to it and say, okay, this is what we think it means. And then we put an understanding to it. And then we're wired to feel sometimes before we think. You know, in terms of we start feeling it before we think through it and say, okay, what does this really mean? And then we get stimulus, continuous stimulus from others around us. So what does EQ look like? EQ basically, there's 4 quadrants, and if there's anything you're going to take away from this, this is what it looks like. Who I am, which is self-awareness. You know, am I self-aware about myself? What do I do? Am I managed? This is self-management. Do I manage myself? You know, if I'm going to say I'm going to do it, do I do it? This is with others, who I am, social empathy. You know, am I empathetic towards the others' needs? You know, sometimes what happens is as individuals, we look at things from our perspective and not from others' perspective. And it's very important as leaders that we look at things from their perspective. And the last but not least is relationship management. You know, relationships are tough to foster, but they can break like this in a second. And I think what's important with relationships is that even though they take time, you really got to work at it. You know, think about your personal relationships or whether it's business relationships. We've all got to work very hard towards that. And I want to give you a quick example. You know, there was a famous leader in the U.S., John F. Kennedy. I'm sure you've heard of him. You know, one of the famous presidents of the U.S. And you know, during his campaign speech, I want to give you an example of self-awareness. He was on the campaign trail, and he was speaking to the people and talking about West Virginia specifically.